Tricia Roos to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much. So I read about you. You're a coach, mother, and you have an extensive background, I believe, in high school sports administration, something like that.
Yeah. So for about 16 years, I was the head volleyball coach at a large private Catholic high school. And then my day job was the director of admissions. And so I really got to know every applicant applying to the school and just working with families to see if the school was the best fit. And then by the end of the day, I was down in the gym coaching volleyball. So I got to know kids a little bit more personal level when I was in the gym with them.
hmm And so you were doing that, and then you transitioned to being a motivational coach.
Yeah, sort of. So I left my job last year and I'd been writing a book. And so I really wanted to pursue public speaking
Hmm.
and getting my book out in the world. The book is called When Wishes Change. And so I started, doing some traveling and speaking locally here in Dallas. And that kind of started taking off at the same time of launching my book. And then, I knew I couldn't step away from volleyball completely. And so my role is a little bit different now. I'm the director of coaching at a large volleyball club here in Dallas. And my main job is to really coach coaches. And so many
Hmm.
coaches come in to the profession really eager and excited to coach, but they're young and they don't have a lot of experience. And so I start off with a conversation to get to know them a little bit more and to try to figure out what their coaching style is. And then we, start formulating kind of who they are as a coach and helping them to be the best that they can be.
hmm And what would you say is some of the biggest hurdles you have to deal with when you're coaching these coaches? For example, is it a knowledge-based type of thing where they just don't know what it takes or the knowledge needed to run a team? Or is it more so they have to understand intrinsically like what these students are going through or what these kids are going through so they can say, okay, this person's going to be motivated if I do this?
Mm-hmm. So I think the main challenge is the fact that most people that get into coaching are transitioning from a stage in their life where they were a player. And
Hmm.
so they actually have pretty good knowledge of the game, but that knowledge might be isolated to, like in volleyball, their specific position. And so they may know a lot about, whatever they did. Maybe it was being a setter, but knowing the game at a higher, like strategic level to coach all the positions. And then another part of that is, as a player, you just didn't understand the logistics and how much went on behind the scenes on the coach's end of planning and communicating with parents. And, on the side, they're always managing relationships with, the players on the team together, like the team chemistry, as well as individual relationships. And so they really have to understand that they have to take a lot of time to get to know each player on their team and kind of the way they tick. And so a lot of people are like, well, this is who I am. This is the kind of coach I am.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, that maybe works for some kids, but it may not work for all kids. Like maybe some kids are visual. And so you need to be able to show them, what that looks like. And they just have to learn what their style is, but also learn other learning styles so that they can speak to all different kinds of athletes.
hmm And do you think like their skill level is maybe making them think, well, if I can do it, you can do it? And I know sometimes when a new mind tries something new that they have never done before. So, for example, let's say a student is coming in to play volleyball and they never played volleyball. They don't know the positions. They don't know how to hit properly. They use their back of their arms, their like set of their forearms, and they're just hitting wrong. They're not getting the right direction. They're doing all these things incorrectly. Sometimes as a player, because I played volleyball in high school also, we might think that people should already know this. Like, this is common sense. You should know this, right? It's because we already had that experience. Do you find that coaches are like that, where they're coming in? I know this. This is common sense. You should know this too.
So I think that the hardest age to coach is actually at the beginner stages because when you are teaching how to pass and hit and set, you have to be able to break down that skill into 10 little mini parts and teach them how to move their feet first and then hold their platform and then understand how to break down a skill. So, kind of like what you're saying, if you have played at a high level, you're like, you just put your hands together and pass. Why is that so hard? but they have to learn the footwork. They have to learn the movement. They have to learn all the little tiny steps to get there. But, the thing about players being coaches is they do have the knowledge of the game, but you really have to explore the understanding of that coach at a deeper level. And so sometimes they really get it. They understand how to break it down, and that makes sense to them. And sometimes they don't. But for me, I always try to find the strength in that coach. And so we have had player coaches that played at a very high level, and their strength is coaching older girls. They're better at coming into a 17 team or a 16 team because maybe they're not good at breaking down passing, but they're really good about strategy on defense or on offense. And that's what those girls need. And then other people come in and they're like, yeah, I totally understand the mind of a third grader and, all the intricacies of teaching passing and breaking it down. And you're like, okay, let's talk with you about coaching a 10s team or an 11s team. And so I think everybody comes into it differently, even if you weren't a player. I think some of my best coaches that I've ever hired, some men in particular, maybe they came from a different sport, but they're just really good at teaching and motivating. And so, as long as they're coachable and they're open to learning despite their experience, I think you just have to find the strengths of that person and find the best fit for them.
Definitely. And a little bit about me, I was a swim coach in college. So I did lifeguarding. I did swim coaching for ages 6 months all the way to teenagers. I even had some adults that didn't know how to swim that were like the parents of the kids. And they're like, Mike, can you teach me how to swim? I said, sure. What I noticed in the beginning was I didn't know how to break things down. Even though I was going to school for education, I was doing all this book knowledge on what it is to be a teacher, I didn't have the practical experience yet. Working with the children, working with a classroom, I didn't have that experience. So I would take the knowledge that I knew and say, well, come on, guys, this is easy. But I had to break it down to the micro level, baby steps, right? Just small chunking blocking for them to say, okay, this is what we do. And in the beginning of my swim career, I was able to teach kids how to swim, but it wasn't as effective in my last year of teaching because I have learned the ABCs of swimming. It's not just, all right, let's move our arms and our kicks and we're moving across the pool. It's so much. It has to be perfecting the kicks, perfecting how the body moves, the arms, everything. It's all basically like a dance. So we learn everything, but I had to learn as a coach to break things down. And I think that's so important for a coach to realize that, yes, we have the knowledge base. Yes, we have the skills, but we have to know how to break that down for children, especially because in a sense, those children are just experiencing everything for the first time. That's interesting. At the same time, we use our wisdom, our knowledge, or common sense to try to steer them in a certain way. For example, there's a story of a child who's walking with their parent, and the parent sees a puddle, and the parent moves the child away from the puddle. So the kid is not jumping in the puddle, getting all muddy and dirty, right? But it'd be a headache for the parent, right? Well, now the kid has wet boots, wet socks, but now that child doesn't know what it is like to splash around in a puddle. We know what that feels like. We know about the wet socks. We know about it being cold if it's in the winter months, but do they know, right? So we're stripping away things from them just because we have a knowledge base or we have a wisdom set on that. And that leads us into being a parent, right? Like we can be a coach, we can teach kids, but when it comes to being a parent, right? Because you're a mother, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How does that correlate? We know how to break things down for our team. We know how to break things down for our coaches, the people that we're sending off to teach other students. But do we know how to allow them to be themselves, be free, charismatic, and to learn through the world and their environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it kind of has two parts. Sometimes parenting is completely different. And you think, like I thought as a coach, I've worked with teenagers and young kids my whole life, that parenting would be easier. But it's different when it's your own kid. And at the same time, I can say that coaching has significantly helped me as a parent. And so, for example, I know in coaching, and this has maybe been a little bit more because of this generation of kids, they want to know the why. They need to understand the why, just like you said with the puddle. I'm really good at breaking down the why I'm teaching you this, so that when I teach them footwork, I'll say, well, give me an example of why I'm teaching you this. Like, when in a game would this be applicable for you? And so we talk through the why. I think that translates really well to parenting. It's important for your kids to respect you, and they should just listen to you because you're the parent. Like, go brush your teeth, go do this, go do that. But I do find that with parenting, just like coaching, I explain to them the why. So I'm not just making you brush your teeth every morning because I'm the boss and I'm telling you to. Let's talk about what could happen to your teeth and cavities and all the terrible things that could happen at the dentist office if we don't brush our teeth. Well, when you explain that to a kid, they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to go to the dentist and have to get cavities filled and have to get shots or any kind of pain. And so it's not as much of a problem if you understand the why. And sometimes I think parents especially think, well, they should just do what I tell them to because I'm the parent. And I agree that they should respect what you're saying, but I do think that it really helps kids to behave better and to respect their parents better when you can talk to them about why you can't just run across the street without looking. I mean, I live on a pretty busy street and we're friends with our neighbors. And, you know, I've had to be really bolt across the street without looking, or if a ball goes in the street, why? And that's been really ingrained in their head. And they still, like any kid, they'll still whine about brushing their teeth. They'll still slip up a little bit. But I do believe it helps when we understand the why. One thing I will say is, like, my son is 11. He plays flex baseball. And so it's not volleyball, but it is a competitive sport. And there is a fine line as a parent who knows how to coach, because I can find myself coaching my child in the car afterwards or on the way to the game. And I find myself applying some of the rules I've told my parents before of kids that I coach, in that after a game or tournament, you don't talk baseball. We don't talk. I tell them, don't talk about the game. Just tell your kid you love them and they played great, win or lose, because they need to know that first and foremost, you love them no matter what. You're not mad at them because of their sports performance. But it is really hard because I do love coaching and instructing, and sometimes that can come into my personal life with my kids. But I'm finding myself almost coaching myself. Like, what would I tell a parent of a kid and what's best for the child, and then applying that to myself. It'll be interesting because my daughter just turned 6 and she really wants to play volleyball. I'm not forcing it on her, but she is interested. But I'm really trying hard to be a parent in those situations and not to try to be a coach.
Mm-hmm. There's a difference between a parent and a coach. For example, I played elementary basketball. I had a coach, Coach Jackson, right? Great guy, kind, but he was tough, right? He had high expectations for the team. If my dad was the coach in elementary, would I have pushed myself the same way I pushed myself for Coach Jackson? The answer is no. I wouldn't have. I know me. I wouldn't have that. Oh, it's just dad, right? So I'm not going to push myself. I want to talk to you about the importance of a coach, right? Important of a mentor, a teacher per se, for your student to look up to, because mom and dad is mom and dad. And when a kid looks at mom and dad, they know sort of what they can get away with, right? Especially if they have tested the waters and they realize, oh, this actually works. And now they're super intelligent when it comes to that. They can say, okay, well, mom doesn't like when I do this. So when I'm upset with mom, I'm going to do this. And so they get you upset, or they know the right words to say, or they know the right people to talk to. For example, if mom doesn't let me drink soda, grandma or grandpa will let me drink soda. So they know the right people. They're super intelligent when it comes to that. They know how to get the things that they want.
Yep.
But when you have a coach that has the expectations for a sport, an activity, or a teacher for a subject, this is what we're going to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But sometimes for parenting, there's going to be ifs, ands, or buts, because the kid's going to say, Mom, I'm so upset with you because you said this to me, or you didn't pick me up on time. It could be the littlest thing. But when it comes to teaching or coaching, hey, that coach is going to do what they're going to do, and you better do what the coach is saying. Otherwise, you're not going to be in the game, right? Especially for me, it's like, yeah, he tried to rotate the people, but the people who put in the work, put in the effort, those are the people who got playtime. So when we're talking about the difference between parenting and coaching, what are some of the biggest differences that make a coach and a parent a parent?
Well, I have coached my own kids, and I have also had others coach my kids. And I think the biggest difference is, you know, kind of like what you said, when I was coaching my own kids, it was really hard for them to like draw the line.
Mm.
But there needs to be that line. And I knew, when your kids are little, it's like parent volunteers are the coaches. And I'm like the token coach. And so I was always assigned. But I knew, especially with my son in baseball, I did not want to be the coach of his basketball team, his baseball team, whatever team, because we needed to have a line. I needed to be the parent, like you said, that enforces the rules at home, but make sure he understands unconditional love for him, no matter his performance. And the coach needs to have the rules of the team and a different kind of love for him as an athlete and be able to push him and challenge him. And, just yesterday we had a baseball game in the morning and then we had a break. We won and we were going to the semifinals. And so me and some other parents took the boys to lunch. Well, of course, they all want to drink soda. But for us, we were able to say, well, we know that coach does not allow you to have sodas in the middle of a tournament. So you can have water or something else. And they were able to all, yep, you're right. Coach said this, and we're not allowed to have that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes as a parent, when you're like, no, you can't have ice cream or you can't have this, they're going to whine more. They're going to fight you more. But they know that with coach, these are the rules. And this is where we can we mess around and where we can't mess around. And one of them is, what they're eating and drinking in the middle of the tournament. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that coach has rules and expectations about what time they have to be there and their warm-up procedure and all of those things. I do believe that coaches have a whole different level of authority than a parent in that world. And for years, even before I was a parent, I would have parents call me, be like, hey, I'm trying to get so-and-so to focus more on academics, but she keeps blowing off her homework for practice. So I would have to step in and bring that kid in my office. And a lot of times I remember in the back of my head, I was like, man, what is wrong with the parent? They can't enforce these rules. But really, they were just asking me to help reinforce, what they want for their kid. And they knew that I had a different kind of relationship with their child than I did, and that I could assist them essentially as a parent in helping make sure their kid did what they were supposed to do. And now that I'm a parent, I find myself doing that in my son's baseball coach, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to him and I'll be like, hey, Cameron was really hard on himself about his strikeout today. Do you mind talking to him? And the coach doesn't mind at all. He wants what's best for Cameron. And so he will pull him aside at the next practice and be like, hey, man, like you got it. Or work with him about his technique and form to help him improve. And so it's really interesting because as I became a parent, I started to see how that parent-coach relationship works. Like we're all a big old village trying to take care of our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a better appreciation for that now.
Yeah. I understand the concept of having a village raise one child because everyone's going to have a piece in that child's development.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have good people, you're going to have bad people, but you need both. You need everyone so that child can see. And I think one of the most dangerous sayings that a parent can say is, I want to give my child a life that I never had. Mm-hmm. Because the life that you had made you who you are. So if you don't like who you are, then of course that's going to be a mindset journey. Then you have to go on that journey to self-betterment, empowerment, basically. Challenge, right? Challenge is going to be one of the best lessons for any student. When they face a challenge, they have to show up. They have to learn how to deal with that. We're living in a society where many children choose not to take the challenge, whether they're on a sports team, whether they're in school and they can't get a subject right. They just want to quit. They just want to give up. Is that something that you see often when you're dealing with your children or that you see in other children when you go to sports games and tournaments?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's a fear of adversity, there's a fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of that comes from, I believe, their expectation of themselves to be perfect. And if they
Mm-hmm.
can't perform perfectly, they might as well not perform. The hardest kinds of kids to coach are those that are very high academic achievers. And the reason is that they know that if they study really hard, they can make an A on a test. They can, make 100 on a test, whatever. But sometimes in athletics, you could try really hard, but someone may still be better than you.
Mm-hmm.
You could try really hard. You could try and put your best foot forward and work your hardest, but still lose the game. Maybe the other team has just had a better day that day. And that's really hard for a high academic achieving kid because they're like, wait a minute, when I work hard and try hard, I'm supposed to always be successful. And that is not the magic formula for sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in sports, the mindset needs to be if you work really hard and try your best and challenge yourself, then you just won't have regrets. You'll be able to say, I put it all out there. I did my very best. We walked away and didn't win, but at least I did everything I could and I didn't hold back. And that's the unfortunate thing is over the years, I've coached kids that I've watched hold themselves back on purpose because they're too afraid of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And they're too afraid that if they try their best and lose still, that they are not worthy of calling themselves an athlete or being a volleyball player or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that in my own kids. My son is very, very academically gifted and sometimes has that problem. And especially him playing baseball. It's a sport where having a batting average of 400 is like really good, which means you're only getting on base 40% of the time. So it's really hard. I can see him as he's a young athlete developing to accept those failures and still see progress and still see successes. But my daughter is, she just turned 6. She's able actually to like self-correct and pump herself up, and she loves challenges. And maybe that's because she has an older brother and she's always put herself out there with older kids and tries and probably fails most of the time because they're bigger and stronger than her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a birth order thing or if it's just something you're born with. But at the same time, whatever kid you have, the mental training is a muscle. I mean, you have to train that muscle in your brain constantly to think positively, to see the best in yourself, to work on visualization. There's so much that goes into the mental training of an athlete that I think we overlook and we underestimate because it's all about that mindset in how they see themselves and how positive they're thinking and ultimately what the outcome will be.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for too long, we've expected perfection and we put such an emphasis on winning. And as a coach who has won a lot, I've won 5 state championships and I think my team's won 80 something percent of the time. It was hard for me in years where my teams weren't winning as much. I even saw myself, I'm like, well, am I not as good of a coach as I was last year when we did win more? But I've had to retrain my own brain and say, no, I'm doing everything I can. Maybe we just don't have as much talent, or maybe the competition just got stronger. And as long as you see progress over perfection, that's still a win. Mm-hmm. And I've had to train myself as a coach to see that in years where we weren't winning as much. And so, I think the best that we can do for our kids as a coach or as a parent is just tell them we love them no matter what, and tell them that the best they can do is work their hardest so that they don't have regrets. I think that they will be able to release some of that pressure on themselves for being perfect.
Mm-hmm. I believe having a strong, positive mindset is essential, whether you're a janitor or whether you're a high-performing athlete. You can learn to love what you do, whether it seems remedial to other people, to you, it could be everything. But when we put ourselves in a role, coach, parent, child, is there a perfect, well, maybe not perfect, but is there a mindset that's going to be more appropriate for that given person? So for example, a coach might have to be patient, right? I have to understand patience with my students. They are learning things for the first time. A parent might have to learn or have the mindset of my child is, yes, the love of my life, and I'm going to love them unconditionally, but I want to be a good example for them. And since I have to have a good example for them, I have to make sure I show up too, right? So parents are just not doing negative things, right? So we won't go into the negative things, but just think of negative aspects of life, behaviors, habits, etc. So a parent has to understand that, saying, okay, I can't show my kid this, because if I'm showing them this, then they're going to replicate it, whether when they're in their teen years or when they're adults, right? Because they learned, oh, well, mom did that, dad did that. It must be okay. Then we go into the mindset of a child. We have someone who might be fearful of putting themselves out there, failing. They might be ambitious, outgoing, right? They might be super brave and jumping off sofas, and they're fearless. That's a good mindset to have. But those children who have this fearless type of mindset eventually learn fear, right? And they say, ooh, I got hurt. That doesn't feel good. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to touch base on the three topics we talked about: coaching, parenting, and children, and the strongest mindset. And it could be several, of course, because there's so many variations of a strong positive mindset that we can possibly have. But in your opinion, what would be a strong mindset for a coach, a parent, and a child?
So I think what coaches have to do to a certain extent is be a chameleon. And so you have to be able to manage your expectations based on who you are coaching. And so whether they're beginners and the emphasis is just on progress and not winning, like making sure you're managing those expectations and being a good example to the kids. Like, hey guys, we're not like my daughters, when they started soccer at like 3 or 4, we don't keep score. We're just teaching them skills. We're not teaching them to win. We're just teaching them how to kick a ball, right? But then I know that I've had teams at the highest level in high school sports. I mean, we can make an expectation that we're out to win state this year. And everything we do in practice has to show that you have that expectation. So we can't mess around and goof around and take off the focus of our form and technique. Now, there's a fine line. It doesn't mean if you don't win a state championship, you're a failure and a disappointment. But our goals are high and we have high expectations because we know that you are capable. And I think when you show kids how much you believe in them and how capable you believe that they are, like they're going to start believing in themselves and showing their capacity, and they're going to start pushing their limits and exceeding expectations. And so I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I've coached 3-year-old soccer players where we didn't even talk about winning. And then I've coached 18-year-olds where we did talk about winning a state championship was our goal. Because if we push ourselves and, perform at that level, we can do it. And I also think that as a coach, a big thing besides managing your expectations is that patience you talked about over time, like knowing there's going to be bad days and good days, but like as you slowly progress, you're going to get there, you're going to reach your goals. Back to kind of being a chameleon, you do have to really get to know the kids on your team and push kids differently. I could get in this kid's face a little bit more and be a little bit more intense with them as a coach. And maybe they desire that. And maybe that's what really gets them going. And another kid, I have to understand that approach does not work at all. Like I can't raise my voice at all or talk to them that way. And so I think those are the really important things as a coach. As a parent, I think that your job is to support their goals and dreams any way you can. And so if your kid needs a day off and they need a little bit of a mental break, support them. Don't push them past their limit. Give them a day of rest. And sometimes that might mean just kind of laying around and, they may want to just be on a device a little bit, but, sometimes that's okay if it's within moderation. I think as a parent, you also, again, have to just show your love. And my big thing with my kids is respect for their coaches and for their teammates. And I could care less if you just hit a home run, if you, chunked your bat and you didn't high five your teammates, or you acted inappropriate when you did something good. That means more to me than your successful action of a home run. And so I really monitor the behavior of my kids. Our son knows that if he strikes out, he can't throw a fit and like put himself in a corner in the dugout. He still needs to be engaged in the game. And that means more to us than the strikeout.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like letting your kids know and proving to your kids that their behavior, attitude, work ethic mean more than the winning and, the run, the kills, or whatever your sport is, that's the way that you should be modeling your behavior. And then for kids, like I said, I mean, for children, I talk a lot about respect. I talk a lot about integrity. And so when I'm coaching and I say, hey, you have this many reps, you have to pass 50 times back and forth, it's important for them to know that if they're cheating themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And integrity is a really big thing. Attitude, win or lose, it means more to me when you lose, how you treat your opponent. I'm going to still shake their hand. I'm going to still say good game. Of course, you're going to shake their hand and say good game when you win, but are you still going to act with respect and integrity and have a good attitude when you lose? Mm-hmm. That's really important. Teaching them to have grace for themselves and allow themselves to fail and be able to pick themselves up is really important. So I think that, all of those things go hand in hand. The parents need to work with the coaches need to work with the kids, the parents need to be able at home to help reinforce what the coach is teaching. We all have to work together, but you're right in that everybody kind of has to have different roles and you're at different stages of forming that athlete. But at the end of the day, we just have to support our kids, and parents really need to do a better job of supporting the kids' coaches and not bad mouthing coaches when they come home or in the car, mm-hmm. and saying things to their kids about the coaches that are inappropriate, because then that child will start behaving disrespectful to their coach, and that never works.
Right.
So I think that's really important too for the parents to model that behavior.
Yeah. And then your child is going to learn exactly what you're emanating. If you're talking negative about people, I guess talking negative about people is okay. So if someone does something inappropriate or wrong in our eyes or in our determination, then we can badmouth them. And that's just going to lead to people not wanting to work together. Because if I don't like this person, why am I going to work for them? Why am I going to push myself for them? Because in a sense, the team is pushing for the coach. And then also in a sense, the team is working collectively for that victory, for that win. However, if you have students or team members on that team who are just an anchor per se of negativity, of hate per se, they're not going to give 100%. And I find as a coach, when I was a teacher, I had to give 100% every single day, regardless of how I felt. Even if I was tired, even if I didn't want to show up, I had to show up every single day. And as a coach, I said, I have to show up. As a teacher, I have to show up. And I'm on the way to being a parent. I have to show up every single day. And if I don't, they're going to see that. The children pay attention, right? Because one of the biggest areas where they learn is looking at their environment and their behavior around them. So if they look at the behavior of coach or mom, that's what they're going to learn. If they look at the environment of the household, that's what they're going to learn. So it's important for parents also to make sure that their home is going to build the child and their mindset to be positive, nurturing, caring, and then ambitious too, because we want them to go after more. We want them to be successful. But at the same time, we have to allow them to face challenge, face adversity, and then to work things out in their own mind. Because yes, we might have the answers, but do we have their answer? And it's important for parents to understand that, especially coaches too, because we might have not had that experience because our world is different than their world. They have cell phones. Everyone has cell phones, it seems like. I know a 4-year-old who has a cell phone. So it's like, wow, it's like when I was 4 years old, I don't even think I had any electronics, but now it is common, right? They know how to turn on the TV. They can watch Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever TV they watch. They can do that without mom or dad needing to help them. They can just do it. Boom, they're watching a movie now. So it's a different world. I wanted to go outside, go to the park. Now they're like, well, it's pretty comfortable inside this house. I like it. And they're being comfortable. And I'm not saying that comfort's a bad thing, but at the same time, live a little bit, right? I think that's going to be important for coaches to push them. And then also parents to make sure that the kids are just not staying in the home all day.
Yeah.
Whether they go out and they do a sport or whether they just go out to the park and they interact with other children, that's going to be powerful too, right? Because then they're learning more so than just their environment. And I'm a huge advocate of making sure people have a surplus of knowledge that they can gain from. So if it's from the park, from soccer, from baseball, from volleyball, all of those things are going to just help your child have more experiences and then be better equipped for when they become adults. Because I find that the students who have low expectations, they aim for those low expectations in life. And then as adults, it reflects it. I've been teaching for 12 years. So, like the students that I had when they were 5, now they're teenagers, right? They're going to be coming up to 18. Some are already driving. I can see how they were as a young child to how they are now. It was almost like, okay, this person's going to be good. This person's lazy. So let's see how they turn out. And now I'm seeing that. So, of course, parents, make sure that your child is not taking the easy road, making sure you're giving them as many experiences as possible, because we want them to be successful. We want them to be ambitious, but at the same time, we don't want to burn them out. We don't want to stress them out, because the schools do that already enough, with all the standardized testing, with all of the hoopla that's going on. There's a lot of things, a lot of stress that's happening in schools that parents don't necessarily see, because we send the kid off to school and the kid has to deal with that stress. Bullying is the thing, right? Now, the parent might not know their kid is getting bullied unless they see it happen. Like if they go to pick up the kid and then something happens with another student, and then you're like, oh, wow, my kid's getting bullied. You see a text message or something like that, kids getting bullied online, social media, then we're starting to see they have stress too. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is stress, right? Stress from the coach, stress from the parent, stress from my peers. All of that is on that student or on that child. How can a coach, how can a parent help with that stress? Because in a sense, if we look back at when we were younger, we had stress. It's just different. Now we have adult stress. We have, okay, I got to make sure I pay the bills sometimes. So we have lights. I have to make sure I go grocery shopping. So we have food to eat. That's a different type of stress. Now, I'm not saying it's so stressful where we're like, oh my God, I can't do this, but it is a stress that we have to deal with. So stress management from coaching, parenting, and how the child's going to deal with that.
Well, I think with kids, being in select sports at a much younger age and constantly in competition, there is more stress. It's a different kind of stress, like you said, on these kids than what we experienced, because that wasn't as prevalent as it is now. On the Today Show, they were just talking about how another student athlete committed suicide. And there's been several in the last month. There was a guy on the Today Show last month that talked about that how stressful it's been being a college athlete and performing and having the expectations. They also talked about how fan behavior and social media has really inflicted this extra stress on athletes, because you could go on social media after a huge basketball game and the guy that missed the winning shot just gets reamed about what a terrible person he is, right? And I'm sure he was trying his best, and that's not fair to these kids, that they're seeing adults talk bad about them and they're being talked bad about on TV and whatever. And so that's why I think that how we develop our confidence and love and teach them that it's really how hard they work and their attitude that means more than the wins and losses, can prepare them better for the nasty world that unfortunately we live in, where athletes are reamed based on their performance. And they're just human beings. They're normal people that work their hardest and they put a lot of hours and time in. And there's a lot of documentaries, on Netflix about athletes because of that have had mental breakdowns, kind of like the Simone Biles thing, right? Like mental toughness was brought to the spotlight again because she was just almost completely lost
Mm-hmm.
mentally and couldn't perform. And I think it's really sad, but it's kind of hard because if you don't provide your kid opportunities to fail and to feel some stress and to battle through adversity their whole life, and you just stick them in a bubble, they will have something come up in their life that they will not be able to handle very well. And so I do believe that introducing them to sports in particular at a young age is healthy because they have to work with their teammates and learn teamwork, and they have to learn how to succeed and fail and win and lose with grace and integrity. But if we lose sight of what's really important as we're teaching them, it's going to come around eventually. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to come around in a good way. They're going to have mental issues with depression or anxiety. They're going to find themselves in situations where their entire identity is in the sport and they don't see who they are as a human being without that sport. That happens a lot with athletes that get injured. As soon as they tear their ACL, they are depressed and have anxiety because all they knew was themselves as a football player. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't identify as anything else in their life. And they have to figure out who they are. And that's not okay. I mean, we need to teach them their identity at a young age. It's not just the sport or as an athlete. So I think that, it's a double-edged sword because stress is part of life and we can't avoid it. I mean, we're going to be stressed in some point of our life professionally in our work environment or our family environment. And sports can be a healthy way of learning how to deal with stress. But it's all in how we're developing them when they're young. And I think that's where we need to put the focus.
Yeah, definitely. Parents are going to play a key role in this because if you have a parent who's going to have high expectations for that child is going to show up. But at the same time, of course, the stress, the anxiety is going to be there for that child. And it's going to depend on how they look at it, right? So they view a situation in a certain light. So if we look at what happened in the Olympics with Simone, right? She had that mental fatigue, that breakdown. But then if we look at someone like Venus and Serena Williams, they had a father who would push them every single day. Practice, 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 practice. And they showed up, right? So we just have a different dynamic in people, right? I don't know Simone's parents, so I couldn't tell you anything about how she was raised. But in the movie King Richard, it gives a synopsis of kind of what happened. But if you do talk to Richard, you get a good understanding of what type of person or personality he is. He's a high strung type of person where he's like, this is going to happen. It's like no ifs, ands, or buts. So the girls had to show up. And I find that when a parent says, hey, you have to, or teacher, if you have to show up, the kids rise to that challenge. They say, I got to show up. Mom
Yep.
said, I have to show up. I'm showing up. Coach says, I have to show up. I have to show up.
Yeah.
So they challenge themselves to show up rather than us not challenging them. Because if we don't challenge them, then they're going to say, okay, this is a breeze.
Yep.
When we challenge them, then they show up.
Yep.
So they have to have that. All right. So yeah, it could be stress because now they're thinking about, well, I have to show up every single day. And then I love what you said earlier. Of course, yes, we want them to show up, but then at the same time, we let them know that we still love them, that we still care for them. And I think that's so important for them to understand that regardless of the outcome, we got your back. We still believe in you. Just because of one issue, one game, it doesn't mean you're going to lose our trust. You're going to lose our love. And that fear of loss, I think, could be the reason why some people have that mental breakdown. They're just so afraid of losing what they had rather than learning at a young age. Yeah, I lost. It sucks, but I know I can get through it. I did get through it. Look where I am today. So they learn from that, right? From that experience. But definitely all great topics, all great things that we talked about. Any final words? And then also please tell people where they can find you.
I've learned so much as a parent, coaching my own kids and raising my kids and watching them be coached by others and coaching other people's kids. And at the end of the day, it really comes back to just teaching them the right way to deal with adversity. And being respectful, having a great attitude, working their best. If you lose and you struck out 3 times yesterday, what do you need me to do for you, buddy? Do you want to go out in the backyard and hit together? Do you want to talk to your coach? Do you want to set up a meeting to see if there's something he has advice for? I mean, instead of giving up, what can we do to support you and help you? And also listening. I mean, I've had so many kids tell me, I hate this sport. I want to quit, but my parents won't let me. They say I have to play in college and they will not like me anymore if I don't play volleyball. I mean, I've heard things like that. And parents have to listen. We have to, and coaches, you have to listen, and kids have to listen to yourself. Like, do you really love this sport and have a passion for it? Or do you see other ways that you could find joy and happiness in your life? Because we only have one shot at life. And if you're miserable and you hate a sport, like, find something that makes you happy. Like, don't feel pressured to have to do anything. And find me. I do have a website. It's just triciaroos.com. It also, you can get to it by going to whenwisheschange.com. But I do consulting. I do coaching. I have my book available. And actually, my book is about a wish changing in my life and finding my way to happiness and seeing light and hope through a really tragic situation. I had a daughter that died in 2015, and we knew during pregnancy that she would not survive. But I was given that news and I had a choice. I could wallow in like disappointment and just sit around and be sad, or I could try to find the best for my situation. And that's what I tried to do with all of my heart. And I think it's a really applicable message to a lot of people too. Allowing your wishes to change and finding hope in any situation that or circumstance that comes your way. So that's where you can find me, and my contact information is on the website. So love to hear from, I love hearing from people all over the world that have questions about coaching or consulting or my book or any of my speaking, anything.
All right, perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Tricia, for spending your morning with me. And of course, everyone, you have all the descriptions below where you can find her. I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions about parenting, coaching, or her book and her experience in that rough time in her life, because parents go through that sometimes and they don't know where to go. They don't know who to go for help. They tough it out by themselves. And I encourage people, if you're going through a hard time, don't tough it out by yourself. There's going to be a resource. There's going to be someone who has went through that, who can help you and be a support system, because we are all here to support people. We're all here to make sure that people can be in a better place, especially as a coach, a speaker, and as a parent. All right, everyone, Tricia Roos.